Ever feel like you need a secret decoder ring just to understand what half the job ads out there are even asking for?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It can be a real struggle to cut through all that jargon. Well, get ready to ditch the dictionary because today we're taking a deep dive into a career that's way more complex than it seems on the surface. We're talking about the fascinating world of the sewing machinist.
And it's about a lot more than just pushing a pedal with this one.
You got that right. And to help us stitch together a clear picture, we're going to be pulling from RoleCatcher's Sewing Machinist Career Guide. They've got some really interesting stuff in there. Some of it was news to me, to be honest.
Really? Like what?
Well, I always thought of sewing as being a pretty solitary job, but this guide really opened my eyes to how much of a team effort it can be, especially in bigger companies or those really high-end fashion houses.
Yeah. That's so true. You've got pattern makers, cutters, and a whole team of machinists all working together.
Exactly. And it's not just about the sewing itself. There's a surprising amount of customer service, trend analysis, even marketing and sales that can come into play.
You've really got to have your finger on the pulse of what's stylish.
It's like they're conducting a finely tuned sewing symphony or something, with everyone playing their part.
That's a great analogy. It's a highly collaborative field, which I think often gets overlooked.
And speaking of overlooked, one thing that really jumped out at me from RoleCatcher's Guide was how much room there is for growth in this career path.
Oh, absolutely. This is something that a lot of people don't realize when they first start out. They think sewing machinist, and that's it. That's the job. But there are actually three main stages that RoleCatcher outlines: entry-level, junior, and senior sewing machinist. Each stage comes with its own set of responsibilities, and as you progress, you have the opportunity to really specialize and hone your skills.
So it's kind of like leveling up in a video game, but instead of collecting coins, you're collecting new techniques and expertise.
Laughing, I like that. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Because when you think about it, it's a craft that requires incredible dexterity and attention to detail.
No doubt about it. I mean, think about it. Some of those C's are absolutely tiny.
Talk about a steady hand.
You got to have a real feel for the fabric and the machine to get it just right.
And speaking of fabric, RoleCatcher also stresses the importance of really understanding the properties of different materials.
Oh, yeah, that's crucial.
Because it's not just about sewing a straight line, it's about knowing how that line is going to behave on silk versus denim versus leather.
And how those materials will drape, how they'll wear over time, how to care for them.
It's like having a deep understanding of the building blocks of fashion.
Exactly. You've got to be able to look at a piece of fabric and just know how it's going to react to different stitching techniques or embellishments.
It's a science as much as an art form, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And one that's constantly evolving.
Especially with all the new technology that's coming out.
It seems like there's a new high-tech sewing machine hitting the market every other week.
Which is pretty cool, but I imagine it also means you need to be pretty adaptable to stay ahead of the curve.
Oh, for sure. The days of just knowing how to operate a basic singer are long gone.
So now you've not only got to know how to thread the needle, but maybe even how to program the computer that's controlling the whole thing.
Exactly. And troubleshoot it when it inevitably decides to have a mind of its own.
Because we all know technology has a way of doing that, but hey, at least you'll never be bored.
That's for sure. It's a fast-paced, ever-changing field, which is part of what makes it so exciting.
And speaking of exciting, one thing I found particularly interesting in RoleCatcher's Guide was the potential for self-employment in this line of work.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, who hasn't dreamt of ditching the 9 to 5 and opening up their own little boutique, creating custom designs for a living?
It definitely has a certain romantic appeal to it.
Right. But RoleCatcher doesn't sugarcoat it. They make it clear that it's not all sunshine and roses.
Definitely not. It's a lot of hard work, and there's a whole other set of skills you need to make it on your own.
Like, what kind of skills are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, you're not just a sewing machinist anymore. You're an entrepreneur.
So you've got to be business savvy, in addition to being creatively gifted.
Exactly. You're responsible for everything from marketing your services to managing your finances.
So it's not just about mastering the perfect French seam, it's about mastering marketing, accounting, all that jazz.
Precisely. You're responsible for finding clients, managing finances, marketing your services. It's a whole other skill set on top of the sewing expertise. RoleCatcher doesn't shy away from that reality, which I appreciate.
It's like the guide is a good friend giving you a gentle reality check before you take the plunge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even if self-employment isn't your ultimate goal, the guide highlights the importance of strong business acumen for any aspiring sewing machinist.
Because even within a traditional work environment, understanding things like pricing, deadlines, and client management is key.
Absolutely. These are skills that can help you excel in any sewing role, from alterations to custom design to even potentially managing a production line.
And it's that business savvy that can really set you apart when it comes to job hunting.
Absolutely. Even if you're not going the entrepreneurial route, having those skills on your resume is huge.
Speaking of resumes, RoleCatcher actually gives a sneak peek into their AI-powered interview prep tools.
Now, those are pretty cool.
They've got this whole system that analyzes your answers to common interview questions.
It's like having a digital career coach in your back pocket.
Right. And the kinds of questions they're using are surprisingly tough.
They really make you think on your feet.
Like, for instance, one question asks, can you describe a time you had to troubleshoot a sewing machine issue?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Because, let's face it, those machines can be a bit finicky sometimes.
To say the least.
And then they hit you with, how do you stay up to date on new sewing techniques and technologies?
Well, that's the thing with this field, isn't it?
It's constantly evolving. You snooze, you lose.
Exactly. You've got to be willing to adapt and learn new things all the time.
And I think that's where RoleCatcher's emphasis on continuous learning comes in.
Oh, absolutely. They really hammer that point home throughout the guide.
Because it's not enough to just be good at what you do today. You've got to be thinking about what you'll need to know tomorrow.
Especially with technology advancing at such a rapid pace.
They even hinted at AI starting to play a role in the recruitment process itself.
Really? That's fascinating.
Yeah, it sounds like they're using algorithms to analyze applications and even conduct initial screening interviews.
So the machines are coming for the HR department now, too.
Seems like it. But hey, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
True. It could potentially make the whole process a lot more efficient and less prone to bias.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll have AI-powered sewing machines that practically run themselves.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
But speaking of getting ahead, RoleCatcher does offer some pretty innovative advice on navigating the job search itself.
Like, what kind of advice are we talking about here?
Well, have you heard of this thing called reverse matching?
I think so. It's like a dating app
Right.
for jobs.
Exactly. You create a profile that showcases all your skills and experience, and then employers can actually search for you based on their specific needs.
So instead of you chasing after them, they're coming to you.
Precisely. It's like flipping the script on traditional job hunting.
That's pretty cool. I bet that's a huge time saver for people who are tired of sending out resumes into the void.
I would imagine so. And it gives you a lot more control over the whole process.
You're not just hoping to be noticed anymore. You're putting yourself out there on your own terms.
And letting the opportunities come to you.
Exactly. It's about showcasing your expertise and letting the right employers come knocking.
And that's a powerful position to be in.
No doubt about it.
But even with all the right tools and technology at your disposal, there's one thing that RoleCatcher keeps coming back to.
And what that?
The importance of passion, of truly loving what you do.
Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to fuel your creativity and keep you going when the going gets tough.
And in a field as dynamic and demanding as this one,
A little bit of passion can go a long way.
it's like the thread that holds it all together. And it's that passion that really shines through in some of the hypothetical profiles that RoleCatcher includes in their guide.
Oh, yeah. Those are really interesting.
They've got one for each career stage, from the entry-level machinist who's just starting out.
To the seasoned senior machinist who's running their own production line.
Exactly. And each profile really brings to life the different paths your career could take.
And the different challenges and rewards that come with each stage.
Like, for instance, the entry-level machinist is all about learning the ropes, mastering those fundamental techniques.
Right. They're probably working on simpler projects, maybe doing a lot of alterations or repairs.
But they're eager to learn, and they're always asking questions.
And soaking up knowledge like a sponge.
Exactly. Then you've got the junior machinist who's starting to spread their wings a little bit.
They've got a few years of experience under their belt, and they're ready to take on more responsibility.
Maybe they're specializing in a particular type of sewing,
Or working with a wider range of fabrics.
and they're starting to develop their own sense of style and design.
That's where things start to get really interesting.
Because they're not just following instructions anymore, they're starting to put their own creative stamp on things.
And then you've got the senior machinist who's at the top of their game.
They've seen it all, done it all.
They're the ones who can handle any project you throw at them,
And they're probably mentoring the next generation of sewing machinists.
passing on their knowledge and expertise.
It's like a whole ecosystem of talent and creativity.
Absolutely. And RoleCatcher's Guide does a fantastic job of capturing that.
They really paint a vivid picture of what it takes to succeed in this field.
And the incredible opportunities that are out there for those who are willing to put in the work.
So as we reach the final stitch of this deep dive, what's the one piece of advice you would give to someone who's just starting out on their sewing machinist journey?
That's a tough one. I think I would have to say, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Because that's how you learn, right?
Exactly. Sewing is all about trial and error, experimenting, figuring out what works and what doesn't.
And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Oh, absolutely. There are so many talented people in this industry who are willing to share their knowledge.
So find a mentor, join a guild, take a class.
And never stop learning.
Because the world of sewing is constantly evolving.
And the more you learn, the more opportunities will open up for you.
So go out there and create something beautiful.
And never stop stitching your own path.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of the sewing machinist.
It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating field with you.
Likewise. And a huge thank you to RoleCatcher for providing such an insightful and comprehensive guide. For anyone listening who's feeling inspired to pick up a needle and thread, we'll be sure to link to RoleCatcher's resources in the show notes. Until next time, happy sewing.